There is a road in central California that the government itself would rather you never found. Follow it far enough into the Diablo Range, past the last vineyard, past the last cell signal, and the pavement gives way to something worse than dirt. It gives way to ground that is, by federal law, too poisonous to walk on. That is where we are ending tonight. Stick around, because the last entry on this list is not just abandoned, it is still leaking into a creek more than 50 years after the final resident locked the door. And it is protected by the same designation the government uses for the most contaminated land in America. California holds almost 300 ghost towns, scattered across desert basins, alpine canyons, and salt marshes. Most of them simply ran out of luck. The 10 places on this list ran out of something stranger: money, sanity, water, or in one case, an entire canyon in a single afternoon. These are the strangest and most forbidden ghost towns left standing in the state, counted down from 10 to the one a federal agency has spent over a decade trying to clean up, and still has not finished. If you like wandering into places most people are told to avoid, at least from the safety of a screen, go ahead and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep finding stories like these. And tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight. Now, number 10. Number 10 is Tumco, buried in the Cargo Muchacho Mountains of Imperial County, close to the Arizona border. Gold mining here goes back 300 years, starting with Spanish prospectors in the 1780s and Sonoran miners who worked the ridges with simple arrastras long before any American company arrived. The boomtown that rose here in the 1890s, first called Hedges, held more than 3,000 residents and pulled over 200,000 ounces of gold from shafts sunk 1,000 feet into the rock. What is left today is stranger than a few collapsed buildings. Massive cyanide leaching vats still stand out in the open desert, rusted through. Used to strip gold from ore too stubborn for older methods. By 1905, the town, then still called Hedges, was abandoned outright after speculative overexpansion buried the operation in debt. A second company revived it in 1910 under the name Tumco, an acronym for its own corporate title. But low-grade ore doomed that attempt within a year as well. The Bureau of Land Management now closes the town site to vehicles entirely, leaving only a narrow footpath past the Hedges Cemetery and into the old workings. Walk that path today, and you are tracing 3 centuries of men chasing the same vein of rock, most of whom left with nothing but a story about the 2 boys whose gold-filled shirts supposedly gave these mountains their name. Tumco earns its spot on this list for its age and its poison-laced machinery. Our next stop was born from poison of a different kind, the kind that comes from a man with a very good sales pitch. Number 9 is Leadfield, tucked deep inside Titus Canyon in Death Valley National Park. In 1925, a promoter named C.C. Julian, already infamous in Los Angeles for stock schemes, took over a struggling lead claim and turned it into one of the boldest frauds in California mining history. His advertisements showed steamboats gliding up the Amargosa River straight to Leadfield's front door. The Amargosa is dry most of the year and never comes within 20 miles of the site. It did not matter. Julian went further, chartering nearly 100 private cars to haul in hundreds of prospective buyers for a free lunch and a live band, all to build excitement around ground that would soon prove nearly worthless. Investors poured in anyway. Share prices rocketed from 10 cents to over $3. And by mid-1926, the California Corporation Commission stepped in to halt the sale of Julian's stock entirely. By late that year, the main tunnel finally broke through to the ore body everyone had been promised, and found almost nothing worth mining. The post office closed by February of 1927, A town that had briefly held 300 residents, a newspaper, and plans for a 40-room hotel emptied out in a matter of months, leaving only a scatter of rusted sheds and 2 sealed mine shafts behind. Julian himself fled the country years later and took his own life overseas. Leadfield is a ghost town built entirely on a lie, which makes it fitting that our next entry was destroyed not by deception, but by a wall of water nobody saw coming. Number 8 is Panamint City, sitting at the head of Surprise Canyon deep in the Panamint Range. This one did not start with prospectors. It started with outlaws. In 1872, a gang of stage robbers hiding out in the canyon crossed paths with 3 men searching for silver, and the 2 groups struck an uneasy partnership. Wells Fargo refused point blank to open a branch in town, so once 2 United States senators poured money into the operation, silver bullion was cast into 400-pound cannonballs, too heavy for a single thief to carry off, and hauled out to Los Angeles on unguarded wagons. By 1874, Panamint City held 2,000 people, 10 saloons, and a reputation as one of the toughest, most lawless camps in the American West. On July 24, 1876, after hours of heavy rain in the mountains above, a flash flood tore down Surprise Canyon and wiped out most of the town's main street in minutes. Decades later, in 1983, another flood scoured the access road down to bedrock, permanently cutting off vehicle access. Today, reaching Panamint City requires a punishing 7.5-mile hike past abandoned trucks half buried in the canyon floor. A town founded by criminals, erased twice by the same narrow gap in the mountains. From outlaws hiding in a canyon, we move to a ghost town that hides something else entirely. Mines the public is simply not allowed to enter. Number 7 is Calico, out past Barstow in the Mojave, probably the most visited ghost town on this entire list, and also one of the strangest cases of a place living 2 lives at once. At its height in the 1880s, Calico supported roughly 500 mining claims and 3,500 residents, chasing one of the richest silver deposits ever found in California. Before the town died almost as fast when silver prices collapsed in the mid-1890s. In the 1950s, Walter Knott, the man behind Knott's Berry Farm, bought the town site and restored its original buildings, eventually turning Calico into California's official Silver Rush ghost town in 2005. Tourists now walk its wooden sidewalks by the thousands every year, browsing gift shops built inside genuine 1880s storefronts. But step off the restored Main Street, and the picture changes fast. The original mine shafts that made Calico rich are considered too dangerous for public entry, unstable rock, old timber supports, and vertical drops that swallow sound whole. Only one commercial tour tunnel is open. Everything else stays sealed. Calico sells itself as a family attraction with a gift shop, but underneath the boardwalk sits a genuine forbidden underworld that very few people have walked in decades. That contrast, a town rebuilt for visitors sitting on top of ground nobody is allowed to touch, sets up our next entry perfectly, because our number 6 spot is forbidden for an entirely different and much more literal reason. Number 6 is Drawbridge, and if you want to see this one for yourself, you are almost certainly going to break the law trying. Built in 1876 by the South Pacific Coast Railroad on a marshy island at the southern tip of San Francisco Bay, Drawbridge grew from a single bridge tender's shack into a hunting and gambling retreat that drew as many as 600 weekend visitors during its peak in the 1920s. It had speakeasies during Prohibition, a rowdy reputation, and no roads in or out, only the railroad tracks, which meant the local police were reportedly reluctant to even set foot there, since most of the residents kept firearms close at hand. As the surrounding marshland was drained and diked for salt production, the ground beneath drawbridge began sinking, and by 1979 the last resident had left for good. The town is now inside the Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge, and it is illegal to set foot there. Trespassers face real fines. The buildings that remain are slowly dissolving into the mud, visible for only a few seconds if you catch the right Amtrak, Capitol Corridor, or Coast Starlight train speeding past on the tracks that still cross the marsh. It is the only true ghost town inside the entire San Francisco Bay Area, sitting in plain sight of millions of people, and almost none of them are allowed to walk its streets. Before we go further, quick reminder, if you're enjoying this countdown, hitting subscribe genuinely helps more people find these stories. Now back to the list, because things are about to get a lot stranger. Number 5 is Cerro Gordo, perched above 500 feet in the Inyo Mountains overlooking Owens Lake. Its name means fat hill in Spanish, and it earned that name honestly, producing well over $17 million in silver and lead during its boom years starting in 1868. At one point becoming one of the wildest, most violent towns in the entire American West. For roughly a century, Cerro Gordo sat remarkably well preserved, protected mostly by its own remoteness and a road that still demands a high-clearance vehicle to climb. That changed in June of 2020, when a fire tore through the historic American Hotel, built in 1871, and destroyed it along with 2 other original structures, just 2 years after a new private owner had purchased the entire town site. Around 20 buildings still stand, including the general store and the superintendent's house, and the site has developed a reputation among paranormal enthusiasts, with visitors reporting unexplained sounds and sensations inside the surviving structures, especially after dark, when the wind moves through empty door frames that once opened onto one of the wildest boomtowns in the West. Whether or not you believe any of that, Cerro Gordo is a rare case of a ghost town's slow decay being interrupted violently in the present day. A reminder that these places are still capable of losing pieces of their history at any moment. Our next stop lost something too, but it lost a man, in the only hanging Death Valley has ever recorded. Number 4 is Skidoo, high in the Panamint Mountains above Death Valley, a town whose name literally means get lost, taken from the slang phrase 23 Skidoo. Founded in 1906 after 2 prospectors stumbled onto gold while lost in a rare desert fog, Skidoo grew fast, reaching 700 residents, a bank, a newspaper, and even telephone service linking it to the outside world. Its mine eventually produced more than $1.5 million in gold, one of the few profitable operations in all of Death Valley, helped along by an engineering feat rare for the desert, a gravity-fed water pipeline running miles down from a spring high on Telescope Peak. But Skidoo's real legacy is darker. In April of 1908, a gambler named Joe Hooch Simpson shot and killed a popular local storekeeper named James Arnold. With no jail strong enough to hold him, Simpson was kept under guard in an iron building until an armed mob arrived at 11 o'clock that night, took him without a struggle, and hanged him from a telephone pole. According to the local legend, passed down and repeated by the Death Valley Natural History Association itself, Simpson was hanged a second time the next morning, purely so photographers who had missed the first execution could get their picture. No one was ever charged. Today, nothing remains of the town itself, only the old stamp mill standing alone in a gully, a monument to a single night when the law simply stepped aside. If Skidoo shows what a mob could do in an evening, our next entry shows what an entire town's reputation can do across more than a century. Number 3 is Bodie, California's most famous ghost town, sitting at over 8,300 feet in the eastern Sierra near the Nevada line. Named after prospector William S. Bodie, who died in a blizzard before he ever saw the boom his discovery created. Bodie exploded to nearly 10,000 residents by 1880, briefly ranking among the largest cities in California. It also earned a reputation as one of the most lawless towns in the West, with 65 saloons lining a mile-long main street, and gunfights, robberies, and murders treated almost as routine. One well-known account says a young girl, hearing her family was moving there, wrote in her diary simply, "Goodbye God, we're going to Bodie." Bodie is preserved today in a condition the state of California calls arrested decay, meaning nothing is restored, everything is simply frozen exactly as it was left. And it comes with a legend that refuses to die. Visitors who take even the smallest item from the site, a nail, a shard of glass, a pebble, report a string of misfortune afterward, and rangers still receive anonymous packages every year containing returned objects along with apology letters describing car accidents, lost jobs, and illness. Whether the curse began as genuine folklore or as a clever trick by park staff trying to protect the site, the letters themselves are real, kept on file in the park museum. Bodie proves that a ghost town does not need murder or poison to feel forbidden. Sometimes a reputation is enough to keep people's hands to themselves. Our number 2 entry did not need a legend. It had real killers hiding inside it. Number 2 is Ballarat, along with the ranch just beyond it in the Panamint Valley on the western edge of Death Valley National Park. Founded in 1897 as a supply post for nearby silver mines, Ballarat held around 500 residents at its peak, with 3 hotels and 7 saloons, before the mines gave out and the post office closed for good in 1917. For decades afterward, the town's only residents were a handful of stubborn desert prospectors, including one man known as Seldom Seen Slim, who lived there until his death in 1968 and is buried in the town cemetery under an epitaph declaring himself half coyote and half wild burro. It was that same isolation, the same emptiness that had drawn prospectors a century earlier, that later made this stretch of desert attractive for an entirely different reason. Then, in the late 1960s, Ballarat became the last supply point for a group calling itself a family, led by a man named Charles Manson, who had holed up at the remote Barker Ranch a few rugged miles south. In October of 1969, law enforcement raided that ranch and arrested Manson along with numerous followers, reportedly finding him hidden beneath a bathroom sink. A rusting 1942 Dodge Power Wagon still sits parked in Ballarat today, long rumored, though never fully confirmed, to have been driven by one of the group's members during those final days of freedom. The ranch building itself burned down in 2009, but the rock walls remain, including the exact corner where the arrest took place. Ballarat is proof that a ghost town's darkest chapter does not always come from its own boom and bust history. Sometimes history simply walks in from outside and never fully leaves. And that brings us to the entry that outranks even this one. The town's so dangerous the federal government legally cannot let you near it. Number 1 is New Idria, hidden deep in the Diablo Range of San Benito County. And it is, without question, the strangest and most forbidden ghost town left in California. Founded in 1854 during the gold rush, New Idria mined mercury, not gold or silver, the toxic metal that was essential for extracting gold from raw ore. Over its lifetime, the mine produced more than 38 million pounds of mercury, making it the second most productive mercury mine in all of North America. The human cost was documented even in its own time. A California state geologist who visited in 1861 wrote that the fumes inside the refinery ruined men's health in as little as 3 or 4 days of labor, and that high wages always brought new workers willing to take the risk anyway. At its peak, New Idria supported a genuine multicultural mining community, complete with a school, a church, and a post office, connected to more than 30 miles of underground tunnels spread across 20 separate levels. The mine finally closed in 1972. What followed was decades of quiet contamination. In 2011, the Environmental Protection Agency officially designated New Idria a Superfund site, one of the most polluted properties in the country, after finding dangerously high levels of mercury and other heavy metals draining into San Carlos Creek and traveling more than 20 miles downstream. The area also sits on naturally occurring asbestos-rich rock, adding another invisible hazard to a site that already carries the most dangerous form of mercury contamination known to science. More than 100 structures remain standing in the ghost town itself, many of them damaged by a fire in 2010 that destroyed roughly half the buildings on the north side. Getting there today means driving miles of unmaintained road through the Panoche Valley, often blocked entirely by washouts, through terrain so remote that even people who grew up nearby sometimes lose the route trying to find their way back in. New Idria is not haunted by legend or by memory of a single violent night. It is haunted by something you cannot see. Poison sitting quietly in the ground, in the water, and in the air, more than 50 years after the last worker walked away. That is what makes it the heaviest entry on this entire list. A ghost town the state of California has not stopped trying to contain, and likely never will. That is the countdown. 10 forgotten places across California that were left behind for very different reasons. Fraud, flood, curse, capture, and poison sitting quietly under the ground. Some of these towns you could visit tomorrow with nothing more than a full tank of gas and a decent pair of boots. Others are protected, gated, or simply too dangerous to approach, no matter how badly you want to see them for yourself. If you made it all the way to New Idria, you already know why it earned the top spot. California still holds close to 300 more ghost towns scattered across its deserts and mountains, and there are plenty of stories left to tell. Let me know down in the comments which one of these 10 you would actually want to see in person, and which one you would stay far away from no matter what. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.